Tansei, good afternoon. I'm Creeson Agecoutay. Welcome to APTN National News. Frustrated with a lack of progress for decades, Grassy Narrows First Nation, northeast of Kenora, Ontario, has announced they are suing the governments of Ontario and Canada for failing to clean up mercury pollution in its lakes and streams. Grassy Narrows Chief Rudy Turtle made the announcement in front of a Toronto courthouse this morning. The suit accuses Canada and Ontario of violating Treaty 3 by failing to ensure the community can safely fish within their territory, putting profits before the lives of Indigenous people. The Wabigoon River was polluted in the 1960s by the Reed paper mill in Dryden upstream from Grassy Narrows. An estimated 9 tons of mercury was dumped into the water. To this day, approximately 90% of the people in Grassy Narrows suffer from mercury poisoning, including Chief Turtle, and live with tremors, paralysis, and even early death. The allegations have yet to be tested in court. And Dennis Ward will have more with Grassy Narrows Chief Rudy Turtle later in the show to talk about the years of contamination in his territory. It's been 5 years since the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls released its final report, and MMIWG advocates are expressing their frustration on the government's minimal progress on the document's 231 calls for justice. APTN's Fraser Needham has that story.
Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak says this is not a happy day.
In Canada, the government's response to the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Women and Girls represents a historic low point. It echoes a persistent pattern of failure.
The AFN has released a new report card that says only 2 of the 231 calls for justice have been completed. Many others have only seen limited progress, and some have not yet been started. Hilda Anderson-Piers of the National Family and Survivors Circle says this is unacceptable.
That there is a lack of political will to fully implement the 231 calls for justice, and it's a real, call out for international oversight, to ensure that there's accountability and the 231 calls for justice are implemented.
Not surprisingly, the NDP was taking the Liberals to task for this slow rate of progress during question period on Monday afternoon.
And the Liberals continue to ignore this ongoing genocide. Commissioners who led this inquiry are giving this government a failing grade. Rates of violence are up. Families are left looking for answers. 5 years, Mr. Speaker, and things are getting worse. Will the Liberals stop stalling and implement the calls for justice to save lives now?
Taking questions from reporters afterwards, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Gary Anna-Sandagri insisted progress on the calls for justice is being made and took issue with the AFN's numbers.
I think there's a lot more than 2 that have been done. I mean, I will have to take issue with that particular number. I have a great deal of respect for the national chief. The work around the 231 calls to justice requires both the federal government, the provinces and territories, as well as civil society who have been working on this for many years. So of the 215 that directly deal with either sole jurisdiction of the federal government or shared jurisdiction, we have advanced roughly 160 of those calls to action.
Both Woodhouse-Neepanak and Anderson-Piers say one call for justice that is long overdue is 1.7, which calls for the appointment of an ombudsperson to oversee government progress on the calls for justice. In January 2023, the Liberals appointed Jennifer Moore-Rattray to provide recommendations on who should fill this role, but on Monday, 1.5 years later, Anna-Sandagri was still unable to say when the ombudsperson position would be actually filled.
Thank you.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
An inquest into the death of a First Nation youth shot and killed by Winnipeg police officer will look into what role systemic racism may have played. Aisha Hudson was 16 when she died after an alleged liquor store robbery and high-speed police chase. Manitoba's police watchdog previously found the officer involved was not criminally liable. A Manitoba judge has released a decision on the scope of the inquest. The judge wrote the inquest should examine whether systemic racism and discrimination, if any, played a part in her death. Her experience in the child welfare system and previous interactions with police should also be examined. No date has been set for the inquest, but it is not expected to take place until 2025. Inquests do not attach blame. They are supposed to prevent similar deaths. Hudson was one of 3 Indigenous people shot and killed by Winnipeg police in the span of 10 days in the spring of 2020. A statement from the Hudson family's lawyers says they're pleased with the decision on the scope of the inquest. William Hudson, Aisha's father, says, quote, "We can no longer ignore the issue of race and how it impacts the treatment of Indigenous people by police." The inquiry respecting the treatment, experiences, and outcomes of Innu in the child protection system continues this week in Sheshashit, Labrador. Angel Moore reports.
Mary Pia Benowin spoke as an expert in public health nursing. She is the primary health director in her community of Sheshashit. Benowin told the inquiry her family was moved from the land into a house with a wood stove but no running water in the 1970s.
And those houses, eventually, in the end, we had to sleep in the kitchen where there was a stove, because the rooms were all frosted with, on the walls, there was ice frosting on the walls, possibly because of condensation from us breathing in the room.
The inquiry began reviewing a 1971 report detailing provincial health authorities' visit to Innu communities, assessing health and living conditions and the need for more funding. Benowin told the inquiry her family were healthy and happy when they lived off the land, but became alcoholic and neglectful when they moved into a house in Sheshashit.
But soon as we came into the community, we know we were not going to see our parents because of drinking and partying, and that I know then that we won't have food in the house to feed our younger siblings.
Benowin told the inquiry there was one good thing about living in the house and not the tent.
When the child welfare workers came, my father was able to lock the door on them and wouldn't open the door. So I think that was good in a way that he was able to keep us safe from being taken away.
The inquiry continues tomorrow, and the final report is due at the end of September.
The special interlocutor on missing children, unmarked graves, and burial sites associated with residential schools has been extended. Kimberly Murray was appointed to the role in June of 2022. Murray's work was slated to wrap up this month with a final report to be released, but now the federal government has extended the work for another 6 months. The 2-year mandate initially came with a budget of $10.4 million. Survivors gatherings have been held all across Canada over the past 2 years. Murray released an interim report in June of 2023. It detailed what Murray says is the failure of the Canadian government to fully fund all searches across Canada and called out the government and churches for destroying crucial records. Murray has also called for the government to step up to counter residential school denialism. A final report will be released before the end of her mandate, and a final national gathering will be held this fall. We have to take a 3-minute break, but when we return, how one charity organization is bringing much-needed health care to a remote First Nation in BC. Stick around. Welcome back. In this next story, CTV's Andrew Johnson will take you on a first-hand look at the challenges and solutions to delivering healthcare to some of the remotest parts of the country and the charity's high-fly mission to give back. Watch this.
After an hours-long delay, it's finally safe to fly. And a team from Helicopters Without Borders takes off from Vancouver for a remote First Nation. Packed inside the chopper, a mobile dental clinic and a generator. Once on the ground on the Douglas First Nation, it takes less than 90 minutes during a power outage for the clinic to see its first patient.
We fly in, unbox everything, and build the clinic in any space possible. All we need is a plug-in and a sink.
Approximately 120 people live here in Tupela, about a 5-hour return trip by logging road from the nearest city. A trip to the dentist or doctor is an all-day affair. If you own a car, many here do not.
We've got the community members that never accessed the service before because of lack of transportation.
At night, your mouth dries up, and all the sugar bugs have they got a party in there.
Others, like 11-year-old Zoe, developed a fear of the dentist early on.
As they explained it, you could see her relaxing a bit. Okay. And it was nice to witness.
It's a way of lowering the barriers to service, creating proper equity within the healthcare system.
Helicopters Without Borders was co-founded by the young pilot whose dream was to marry aviation with nonprofit work.
We followed our dream of working with remote Indigenous communities in Canada, specifically the ones with hard-to-get-to transportation, and look for ways that we can partner with them.
McClung Sydenham believes the most cost-effective way to provide care to remote areas is to fly in teams of clinical workers who can tackle everything from mental health to harm reduction, but resources are always tight.
We're trying to get to that point where we don't have to say no.
We've got a long game on this that we've got to play, which is cleanings.
They'll be back here in a few months playing the long game in remote communities like this across the province. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Tupela, BC.
It's the most prestigious Indigenous art market in the world. The 102nd Santa Fe Indian Market in New Mexico will host hundreds of Indigenous artists from across North America, not to mention drawing an estimated 100,000 people. While northern representation at the market has been lacking in previous years, this year that's about to change. Here's Sarah Connors with that story.
These are all antique beads here that I've sourced.
It's clear to see why artist and fashion designer Randy Nelson's craftsmanship is top-notch. Nelson, who is Agecoutay and based in Whitehorse, is passionate about incorporating natural materials into her work. That's why she, along with a cohort of 10 other artists from the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, were recently selected to attend the Santa Fe Indian Market in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The market draws in around 100,000 customers and 800 artists from across North America.
I understand Santa Fe to be a really big milestone in people's career. It's really prestigious, and it's definitely the top artists who are accepted to go.
The Yukon First Nations Culture and Tourism Association and Northwest Territories Arts Program partnered with the Southwestern Association for Indian Arts to bring this cohort to Santa Fe. The organization says there's been minimal participation from Yukon and NWT artists, something they want to change. In addition to the market, the cohort will also get the opportunity to meet with retail galleries and participate in fashion shows and an awards ceremony.
It's the first cohort ever in 102 years of the market, so it's pretty exciting that they did this collaboration. So these are some of the materials I use. This is caribou hair, so this is the whitest part that comes from the neck.
Nelson hopes her use of quills, antler, and ermine fur will help get her international exposure.
I think just to be able to bring something different, something that's unique to me and my nation and my upbringing, and be able to bring it onto a different stage.
In Yellowknife, Dene carver John Sabarin is working on one of the handful of pieces he'll be taking to the market. His chlorite stone sculptures are a reflection of his Dene roots, stories, and legends.
Looking forward to meeting new art galleries and making connections with people for maybe possibility of other works.
Sabrin says there's a lot of talented artists, but the market up here is smaller than the south.
So there's only so much art that you can sell in the north before you have to send them out. 90% of my carvings I ship out from Yellowknife.
He's glad the market will provide a unique opportunity for northern artists to have their work noticed beyond the territories.
I'm really excited to be part of this team, this cohort team from the Yukon and Northwest Territories artists. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
The Santa Fe Indian Market will run from August 16th to 18th. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Great story, Sarah. From the Naui Udina project to the Southern Chiefs organizations, downtown developments Winnipeg has become a center for Indigenous economic opportunity. Monday, the Institute for Research on Public Policy hosted a panel in the Prairie City to discuss Indigenous approaches to economic growth. Business leaders and entrepreneurs Elaine Beaudry, Cody Mercer, Michelle Cameron, and Jamie Wilson spoke as panelists. They highlighted land acquisition, transforming government relations, and expanding the First Nations workforce as key areas of opportunity. Wilson, who leads Indigenous strategy research and business development at Red River College Polytechnic, shared his thoughts on the meaning of economic reconciliation.
As a country, we were built on a partnership between First Nations and kind of newcomers to the territory. Where we are right now at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, is actually like the land right here was an economic trading hub. So and if you look historically at companies like Hudson Bay Company, who tapped into a vast trade network in North America, it's understanding our own history and getting back to and empowering those relationships. So very much about relationships between First Nations and federal government, provincial governments, and First Nations and business communities.
As we told you earlier, Grassy Narrows First Nation is suing the Ontario and federal government for mercury contamination of its waters. Dennis Ward will have an interview with the chief when we return. Over on the east coast, Halifax 16, Fredericton 17. Anujoak 13, La Grande River 21. Saguenay 22, Quebec City 18. Peterborough 25, Sault Ste. Marie 17 with sun. Big Trout Lake 10, Sudbury 19 with sun. Churchill 1, Norway House 11. Gimli 15, Barons River 16 with sun. Swift Current Rainian 10, Regina 13. Stony Rapids 5 and rainy, Buffalo Narrows 10 with sun. Showers in Peace River 10, Fort McMurray 11. Calgary 12, Medicine Hat 13 with sun. Campbell River 10, Vancouver 11. Dease Lake 9, Prince George 11 with sun. Mayo 14, Watson Lake 9. Yellowknife 8, Wrigley 10. Colville Lake 11, Inuvik 0. Baker Lake 2 with snow. Chesterfield 0. Igloolik -3, Resolute 0. A new study has found mercury contamination is intensifying in the English Wabigoon River system that impacts Grassy Narrows First Nation in Northern Ontario. It's the latest bad news for the nation, whose people have faced significant health effects over generations related to the Dryden pulp mill dumping mercury into the river system since the 1960s. Chief Rudy Turtle spoke with our Dennis Ward earlier on the recent study before the lawsuit was announced. The chief also mentions his intentions to run for Ontario Regional Chief. Here's that interview.
Chief Turtle, thanks for taking some time for us here. As mentioned, this new research suggests that wastewater from the paper mill in Dryden is intensifying mercury contamination in the English Wabigoon River system. What is the impact on the people of Grassy Narrows First Nation?
Well, we're very disappointed with the news, and obviously it scares people because discovering that the mercury is worse than we thought, it's not good news at all. And we have been dealing with this for a long time, and with this study that came out, to discover the stuff that were being dumped in there was making the mercury more toxic. It's just not good for our community.
It's estimated that about 90% of the community's population displays symptoms of mercury poisoning. The federal government's saying it's committed $70 million to a mercury treatment center. I understand that construction is finally set to begin this summer?
Yes, it will begin. We're targeting July. We're hoping it begins in July, and the ground ceremony, we are aiming to have it July 1st, so that's the month we're hoping everything will start.
While we have you, I'd like to turn to the decades-long quest for a site to store nuclear waste. One of the remaining sites that could be chosen is in Ignace, Ontario, a little more than 3 hours east of you. You've written the Nuclear Waste Management Organization expressing your opposition to the project. Can you tell us a bit about why you are opposed?
We are opposed to it because of a potential leak. And we understand that it's not going to happen right away. It could happen once the core area, they're putting it deep in the ground, and they can almost like in a cement container or rock container. It's supposed to be very solid, but we heard that from another. We believe it's in Germany where that kind of container broke 30 years later. And so, we just don't want that to happen to our children or our grandchildren, that there would be a leak in the future. And I realize that it's like Ignis is a couple hours away, but it's in our watershed, and the potential that any leak and that it could come down river is there.
Chief Turtle, finally here, you've just announced that you're running for Ontario Regional Chief. Why is that a role you'd like to seek out?
Well, first of all, I was asked by a fellow chief if I could run, and I said yes. And I feel that with my experience, I've been in politics for almost 20 years, and also been on the front line with our Land Alliance communities. We have 6 communities, and it's still growing. We have other communities that want to join the alliance, and I've been pretty much the chairman of that group, and so with my work with the other chiefs and with the issues that we've been dealing with, I feel that I could do the job of Ontario Regional Chiefs and be able to work with the chiefs of Ontario.
Chief Turtle, I'm sure we'll be talking more to you about that in the days to come, but appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. That's your midday newscast for Tuesday, June 4th. Dennis Ward will be back for your next APTN National Newscast this afternoon. Make sure to join us again. From everyone here in our Winnipeg HQ, hi miigwech, masicho, and thank you for watching. We leave you now with some viz of a rib fest not too long ago.